instead of, yeah? Mm-hmm.
I'll generally just like stop engaging with that teacher.
Perfect. We're talking here generally, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I won't go to our classroom, I won't talk to them, like even in the hallway, like I just stop.
Yeah.
And then the last thing that I do is I do not follow up with that teacher later on to try to address it.
Perfect. This is the only place where you like list the things that you do that mess up, and somebody's like, "That's good." Give me more. Give me more. Now, it's great. Now, all the laughter because on one hand, we really sympathize with what's happening. I can go around asking people, I'm sorry that I'm not doing the turn and share. I'm doing this in the interest of time. It would be much nicer if you had that time to talk to each other, but I think it's all right. What's going on, right? Why would this be happening? The easiest way to get to this is to understand that these behaviors are not happening for no reason. In fact, you as a person are endowed with extraordinary intelligence, and even when you're not conscious, this mental system is trying to protect you from some very important things, from some very bad things that could happen, and that they're holding you from that. Now, how do we get at that? It's pretty simple. Basically, I want you to imagine doing the opposite of the behaviors that you listed in column 2. Meaning if you did not engage in that behavior, or if you did engage in that behavior that you're avoiding, just imagine it. And then write down in that column 3, what is the bad thing that would happen in your imagination? Now, it's not always real. Sometimes you just have to go to the catastrophe that your imagination presents to you. What is the fear? What is the worry? What that underlies this? I'll give you kind of this example as a good one. It's actually a real example, because it's a real example. The other one isn't. That guy never existed. But this one, he's asking himself, now, you can actually come up, you should try to do this for every single behavior that you have listed. In this case, I'm sort of like piling it up together because they seem to sort of like go together. So if I actually answered those calls from the pharmacy, went to refill my prescriptions, if I organized all those damn pills in a box labeled Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then sat down every day to take my pills for every breakfast, what do you think? There's no right answer for this. Yes, there's an answer that he gave. Now, this is really sort of the job, because you're not going to be able to sit everybody down and do an immunity to change map with them. Sometimes you just have to activate your imagination. What do you think in a person like that, in their mind, would be the bad, catastrophic thing that would happen? If you sat down and took the pills. Ooh, seems good. Saw a couple of people just in the very beginning, like it took about like 3 seconds. They wrote down 2 sentences and then sat back and stared into the distance until right now. And sometimes it's just funny, like what comes up. It's just like a nice little joke, really. Sometimes it's not that serious. Doesn't have to be. What do you think he would say? If I didn't wait, if I actually waited after each question or didn't call on students, etc., I didn't correct them, what is the bad thing that would happen? What is the catastrophe, the worry?
I thought about pacing. Like if I asked a follow-up question that or a student droned on and on and on, that I wouldn't be able to get to everything. So by stamping it, I can move on.
Yeah. Very nice. You know, we did this exercise with a sample of 350 teachers, about half of them from China. And this was actually a case for like 20 to 25% of the teachers. And there was the range of responses were like that. In this case, I think it was closer to actually what you're saying, but because the person did not go deep enough into their map, what they put was like, I worry students will feel bored, which at this case, you know, if you're doing this work with somebody, you gotta ask them, what's so bad about that? Occasionally students get bored. What's so bad about that? And it's pretty close to what you're saying. And they would think I'm a bad teacher. More importantly, I would think I'm a bad teacher. I would think I'm useless, I'm pointless. And all it takes, meaning in a space of, you know, silence, that was 7 seconds. Those of you who were saying last time, 7 seconds teachers wait on average, that was 7. First of all, the first step is to be able to see what it is that your mind actually thinks, to not hide from it. I mean, the element of this, the work, what we have been doing up to this point, has been to trying to get ourselves to think about this in kind of, in relatively clear terms, to see what's going on in the mind. My record is 10 minutes in a class, 10 minutes of silence. In fact, that's what I'm known for. Say something, come to class, say something, do not answer, sit down. Sometimes never say anything. That's how comfortable you can get with something. Once the assumption is proven wrong, once you find out that it's your work, at some point I found out this was not today or tomorrow. I cannot convey this to you if you have the same problem as I had before. There's no way. I will just say it to you. You will be like, he's saying something. The worth of my work, this is a very strange thing for a teacher to say, has nothing to do with whether my students are participating or not participating. Now, that's a terrible thing to say. If the teacher that Kevin was working with said that, that would be a terrible thing. But there is a point beyond that where you have cared so much about your students and you're so convinced of what you're doing, so deeply convinced that it's at that point it's only about the exercise of your own truth. I can also say it's about the exercise of your own skill. If it's real skill, has got nothing to do my mental investment in the classroom with the participation of my students. Terrible statement to make, but there's actual truth in it for me, and it allows me to engage my students at a level that is not normal. I know the person next to you doesn't know your whole story, but before we leave, I gotta turn to them and tell them that what you're committing to. Just tell them what it is that you're gonna experiment. And what is the assumption that this is testing? Go ahead, please.
It's okay if I just read my short story I wrote down, and I'll tell you my experiment. So basically my goal was be more responsive to student experiences and adjust curriculum appropriately. So my story was, if I consider student experiences in my class, then I'll have to do a lot more work in order to adjust and change the curriculum. And I don't want to do the extra work. And if I don't want to do the work, does that make me a bad teacher? And kind of like arrive there. So my goal was to, one, create, and my experiment, I guess, was to create a system of feedback for students, to read some of the feedback, and then just kind of assuming some of the things that they might say is to incorporate one structured group learning activity, like we already practiced with Rhonda, into my work this week. And that would be like a small adjustment to the curriculum, and hopefully that wouldn't feel like overwhelming or like a lot more work, because that's what that feels like right now.
Yeah, exactly. But kind of like my story was that I worry that, especially with older teachers, I won't get any respect or like any changes that come from my feedback, and that they'll take my feedback personally, And especially with kind of the colleague that I mentioned in my case study, because it's like, hey, we do get along. I do respect him a lot as a person, and I don't want to give him this feedback and then him or somebody else similar taking it the wrong way.
Okay.
Let me emphasize this one more time. This cannot be a resolution. This is not a change in your regular behavior. This is an experiment, which means you do it once or twice with the intention of never doing it again. And that between these two, there is sort of a tug of war. That this pulls that one towards perfection, and the other pulls the one in the sky towards reality, towards actual manifestation. And the sages say where does the tension take place between these two? When you say this pushes and pulls, there has to be a medium within which this push and pull takes place. And they say the medium in which the tension takes place is the heart. And insofar as something is caught in the tension between the two Jerusalems, itself is a site of Jerusalem. The heart is the third Jerusalem that stands between these two. It's been a privilege to work a little bit with you in some minor corners of that sacred city. And I really look forward, if possible, to see you at some other time. But this is a genuine invitation. Please feel free to be in touch. I think, Noah, that goes for you too. You're a much more accessible, much more open and inviting person than I am.
Of course. No, there will be lots of follow-ups, and we'll be continuing to build. And I think I'm not alone in thinking that it's pretty important we bring this guy back. You want to make Houman skin crawl?
Oh no.
You gotta do 1, 2, 3.